I think you've done a fantastic job of translating the novel to the screen. I'd like to talk about the process of adaptation, really. I know this is a project that has had quite a long life and a long gestation, because Jeremy Thomas, the producer, originally I think wanted to make it with Nick Rogue in the 70s, and then later it was who was it with? It was Richard Stanley, I think, did the draft, and Charlie, is that right?
Yeah. It's a Bruce Robinson script.
A Bruce Robinson script. Did you know about these other kind of attempts before, or did you come to it thinking, I love the book, and then discovered it that way? Did you discover these other kind of attempts or versions before?
Yeah. I mean, it's a tricky one. I mean, I came to it very naively, you know. I had a look on my shelf and I saw it there and I thought, well, no one's made it. And I thought, why has that happened? And I talked to my agent and he went, oh, Jeremy Thomas has got it, which kind of makes sense because he produced Crash, the adaptation of Crash by Cronenberg. But very quickly, within about two or 3 days, I was going to see Jeremy about it, and then I discovered that there'd been all these other versions, and they sent us all the scripts that had been written, and it was like about this high. It's a lot of work that went into it, and we didn't read any of them. And we went back to the book. And that was kind of it, because I don't think you can take the weight of all that stuff. I mean, I would have loved to have seen the Nick Rogue version of this, and I probably would have loved the Bruce Robinson version, but I didn't want to read any of that stuff, because it might have changed what we wanted to do, and I think that would have been a kind of mistake.
Sure, I know that you interviewed Nick Rogue a few years ago, and you kind of know him. Did you ever speak to him? Was there ever a kind of crossover where you spoke to him about the book, or about, like...
No, it wasn't. I didn't even know about it till quite late on. Yeah, I mean, I did an interview with him about Don't Know Now, as you did, you know, and but I was so terrified about talking to Nick Rogue, I drank so much I can't remember any of it. I totally anaesthetised myself, but luckily you just went, you know, once you set him off, he just goes and goes. So.
Probably quite a Nick Rogue way of remembering it, just in kind of like weird hallucinatory fragments. That's probably quite true to the...
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I can remember the end of the beginning for sure.
And Laurie, did you know the book beforehand? Was it something that you read before or not?
I hadn't read it. I read it when Ben told me that they'd written a script, and I read it very quickly on a Kindle on holiday, and then I read the script almost immediately after, and it was the closest. Film, picture-wise, it was the closest I felt. It was, you know, reading them that close together. So there was no nostalgic memory of the book. It was, you know, it was one after the other. So, and it was, you know, there's obviously lots of practical difficulties with shooting it, and it was the images straight. It was as close as it could be. It was great.
Was it quite exciting for you to look at doing something like this? Because I think the last time we worked together was filmed in England. Is that right? Which is obviously a very kind of micro budget, small kind of film, and now there's something where there's a lot of different challenges to face with this.
Completely. It was a million miles, or literally a million miles away from anything we'd done before in terms of its scale and what we were kind of allowed to do. We had money to because it was built mainly, so there was not. I mean, we had a practical location, but most of the apartment and various things were all constructed for us. Or we were part of that design process, which was something we'd just never done before. Everything we've done has been obviously budget-led and time-led, so it's about being available, having available light and available locations, and making the best out of those to fit into the stories that Ben had written. And this was it was a fully constructed thing, which was just brand new territory for us, which was just fantastic to be involved in. We were literally, you know, the mirror lift. We kind of worked out together, all of us. There was a whole set of people that came up with that, and then implementing that, and where lights went.
That was Frank Walsh, who was one of the production designers, one of the production directors on it, and he was. And Frank's got this brilliant IMDb. You know, he worked on Labyrinth, which won me over straight away. I was like, "Fuck yeah, come on!" And he worked on, was it the Beatles Experience or something? That was one of the things he built. He built a museum thing, and he built a mirrored box. So I was explaining it, so I was going, oh yeah, we'll build a mirror lift, and we have to drill holes in it, and then we'll put a camera in it, and we have to paint the reflections out. And he's going, no, this is how we do it, because I've already done it. And he made this incredible thing, you know.
Yeah. Looks amazing. Well, in terms of the adaptation, Amy Jump wrote the script. How involved were you in that process? How does that work between you and Amy in terms of the writing?
My creative input into it is that I looked at the shelf and I pulled the book off and I gave it to her. I went, oh, please help me now, save me, because we need to do this. And and then I remember about 2 months into it, I poked my head around the door. She usually writes in bed. And I said, "You done it yet?" She went, "No." Fuck off. Right, okay, no pressure. But what happened with it, that's basically our working relationship with these things.
Have you done it yet? Fuck off, is that?
Yeah. I mean, she won't tell me, won't even talk about it until it's done. And then I read it and, you know, and go from there. But it's certainly not, I think I've noticed this a lot with like doing a lot of interviews in the last few years about filmmaking, is that there's a kind of this idea of what directors are, you know, that they're the writing process with the writer is that the director is there in a smoking jacket stalking around the room going, oh, I've had another wonderful idea, get out the quill and write it down, you know. And I think maybe that, you know, I mean, I think it's come from Hitchcock basically, that, because he talked about it a lot, where him and his missus would knock up the treatment and then they'd bosh it off to some writer, to poor writer, to finish off, and then they'd give him a load of notes. But our working relationship is not like that. It's more, you know, she'll write it, and then when it's done, and that's it. And then on this one, that was particularly interesting and weird, was that because we'd gone to, because I'd approached Jeremy about the film, and he had the rights to it. And when we found out that it had been spent so many years in development, Amy wasn't happy with being another bunch of jokers coming in asking for money to write again another script. So she said she would write it as a speculative script, she would get paid for it. And if they didn't like it, then that was it. And if they did like it, then they would pay for it and we'd make it. And it sounds a bit of a weird way of working, but what it means is that you've got no, you know, you get to write exactly the thing that you want, and you've got no notes, there's nothing, you go, and it's a real fait accompli, like, here it is, are we going to make this or not? And I think that's how we kind of pushed it through.
So the producers are happy, presumably, because it's free?
Well, exactly, yeah, they love that shit, yeah. I mean, they kind of slightly surprised, you know, like, ooh, that's a weird thing, that's a weird situation. But she's odd like that, Amy. She doesn't like the pressure of the money, because she finds it like counter to being creative, you know. And then when she's done it, and then if they like it, so you do a job and if someone likes it, then they pay you, rather than you demand all the cash up front and then you give them something they don't like, and then everyone cries.
I know you and Amy edited this together as well. Interested, how closely does the final cut of this match the final draft of the script? Or is the final cut the final draft of the script? Is there writing going on in the edit?
Yeah, I mean, it's an unusual thing, and I think it's the Coen brothers are kind of writer, director, editor team. And there was another one. Soderbergh is like that as well. But I think it's to have the writer not just in the edit suite, but as an editor is massively powerful. And she's not there. And when I've done TV in the past, without disrespect for any of the TV production I've done, but the writers might be there to protect their writing. But she's not there to protect her words. She doesn't care about that. But she's there to make sure the film is what she wants it to be. You know, so she's almost kind of half taking off the writer's hat and putting on the editor's hat. But it's all to make that, to service the movie and to strip down and make sure that it goes through. And I almost wonder why that's not more the case, that the writers and, you know, and by the end of the process, and this is why the credit at the end is like directed by and written by as a single card at the end. Is that the who has the, you know, this whole kind of idea of auteur cinema It's like who is in control. Well, I think we're kind of equally in control. She's not here because she doesn't like doing this stuff, and I end up being the face of this, unfortunately, for you and for me. You know, but, I'm not here because I'm desperate to grab all the fucking attention. It's because she just won't do it. I'm afraid.
So going back to the edit, is the edit very different to the draft? I mean, was there
yes,
writing style?
So I wiggled out that. Yes and no. I mean, there's stuff in it. There's stuff that I've put in it, that forces that changes the writing. Sometimes that's more. Basically, I get the script and then I storyboard on top of the script, and there might be montage stuff and cross-cutting of scenes and transitions that are different. And then she'll look at that and go, well, that doesn't fucking work, what have you done? Or I like that, and then that'll go, and then there'll be a negotiation again on top.
Where's that shot?
Yeah.
Where's that shot?
Yeah, which is the eternal question of the writer, isn't it? Why haven't you shot it from every angle? There's only so many hours in the day, but obviously when you get it home, there's no quarter given on that stuff. It's like, I'm just one who's fucked here.
How does it work with you, Laurie? I mean, is there a chance, I imagine something like a field in England, there's a chance to kind of improvise in terms of some of the camera work because you've got a small cast and you're on location, there's a chance to kind of grab stuff. If you're on a big production like this, is there still that chance? Because I just wondered if, can you still be improvisatory in terms of shots, or is it very, do you have a list of shots before you go in that you stick to rigidly, or is there chance to improvise?
We prepped on this more than we'd ever done before because of the size of the show and just how much work it needed doing. And Ben storyboarded the whole thing. How many frames did you paint?
It was 700.
It's just so everything was so it. And what we did it similarly with Free Fire as well is that we Ben storyboarded it and we stuck to that. Where we just poured over that and studied that. And then kind of made lots of decisions about how we were going to approach it and moves and various things. And then we sort of then stopped. What I found is that we stopped looking at that, but we buried it all. So we kind of worked with all the references and worked over that. And then we got into production and then we shot it. So Ben kind of had that in his head, but then we all had that. And I think that we talk about Free Fire especially is that if you went back to the storyboards, I think. With Ben's control of it, is that it's pretty much really quite close to the prep, but you can't. It wasn't like okay, we're doing this one next, we're doing this one next, we're doing this one. We're being that specific about. And that's based on performance as well. So it's kind of giving some space for the performance, and actually being in the space is very different from preparing for it because you can do it all on paper, but once you're in the room, it's a very different thing. So we kind of it was great actually. I loved it. We were living in the same house, which was great, and we spent lots of time together and talking about it a lot. So it was the most prep that we'd done up to that point.
And I was cutting it as we were going along as well.
Yeah.
So we'd do a day, and then we go back to the house, which is a bit. I don't know how we got conned into staying in this grotty fucking house that we were in, but it was like the young ones or something.
By the end of it, yeah.
By the end of it, yeah. And so we had the edit suite in there. So then we'd go back and have a few beers and cut it and all talk about it, and then every couple of days the actors would turn up and watch the performances, and that's something we'd never done before, really. I mean, I'd edited stuff as we'd gone along before, we'd never shown it to people.
Did any kind of social hierarchy develop in this house that you were living in?
No. What happened actually was that, ridiculously on films you get given money to buy food by the production. I know it's not like any other fucking normal job, but it is, anyway, get these little envelopes of money, and then they go in a bowl. They were going in a bowl in the middle of the house, and people just take. So it became more like a communist commune. So we went the other way. We weren't. And then we got told off because the cleaners from the hotel that were cleaning the house because it was such a fucking state were saying, please don't leave the money out because it's, temptation. Yeah, all £30 of it.
I think structurally and narratively the film's quite interesting and share something with the book in that there's no straightforward hero role. I know the book is kind of split into like 3 different kind of points of view really. Is that something that was a kind of hard standing away, or is that something that I know nominally in the film you've got Tom Hiddleston's character being like the supposed hero, but he's not very heroic, is he? Is that something that was difficult to stand in a way?
No, not up until the moment they saw the film. It was fine because but you always got the book. You go, it's the book, it's the book, and it's the book. So you know. But then at the end of the day, when you watch it, you go, oh right, okay. So he's not John McClane. No one wins. Royal doesn't get thrown off the top of the building and like Gruber. You know, and people get kind of a bit upset about it. Kind of go, well, you know, it could have been, but it could have been like that. Could have easily been like that. But then it becomes like those other big building films, you know, that you know in the genre of big building movies that there are about 5 films.
I have to tell you that the copy of High Rise that I have has on the blurb on front cover says more terrifying than the Towering Inferno.
Yeah.
But somebody's going into this thinking that it's the Towering Inferno.
Well, I think the Towering Inferno isn't a million miles. He's quite a Ballardian tale, really. I mean, it's not a million miles away. And there's no real heroes in that either. They're all bastards, and a lot of them just get murdered arbitrarily, you know. But yeah, that's the basic number one big movie, big building movie for me. And then you've got Die Hard, the other one, Dread and the Raid, or at the other end of the thing, you know. So and Paradise Towers probably somewhere over there.
Does it excite you that like looking at stories that don't have that straightforward narrative structure, or is that something that is do you think is always going to interest you? Because it seems to be something that in your films is quite prevalent.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the main things I took away from the book, that the book was very slippery like that, and you kind of think, you follow it and you think, oh, it's going to be wilder because he's the alpha male, and then he you know, Ballard pulls the rug out from under him, and they go, oh, well, then he'll be the doctor because he's the, you know, like in the 50s B movies, it's always the doctors that solve stuff, and then Lang's such an incredible moral coward and a comedian. It's not him either, and then you think he's going to be royal because obviously he's the, you know, the representative of the elite. Yeah, he's the father, he's God, you know, and then he fucks it too. So I like that, you know, and it keeps you guessing all the time. But also the way that Ballard constructed the book. That I remember when I went back to it the first. After I read it when I was a teenager, when I read it when I was 40 odd, I kind of thought, oh, it's like Metropolis, you know, it's like the working class at the bottom are fighting the upper class at the top, and it's just not, that's not what it is, you know. If the working class are represented by BBC documentary makers, then we're all in trouble, you know. So it is that for a moment, and then it becomes, you know, tribal, and then it becomes every man for himself, or every woman for themselves.
I think the film does a really good job of translating the tone and the atmosphere of the book, even though I know you've added certain kind of plot elements and even certain kind of characters to it. What, in terms of the design of the film, which is amazing, it's a fantastic looking film. What was the kind of mood board that you guys kind of put together for that? And yeah, because obviously you got to work together with the production design and costume design and everything. What was the kind of mood board that you guys put together?
It was a bit of looking at Ridley Scott adverts from the early 70s to mid 70s, but then that's a kind of a bit of a mug scam because they are pro rata so expensive, those things, you know, and you can't replicate the look of them because they just, you know, they've spent so much money on those, you know, it's impossible. But so there was a bit of that, and then it was like looking at fashion photography to a degree, and I wanted the movie to be sexy to start with, so I've not really made any films that are particularly sexy. You know, depending on what your stance on caravanning is, but you know, or naked old people running about. But you know, I wanted, you know, I wanted to have that you know, to arouse a little bit, you know, and titillate, and then pull it all away. You know.
So Laurie, how do you achieve that sort of sexy, expensive look with not sexy, expensive money?
Well, no, but for us it was, and I think that working with Mark Tilsley designed it was again, he's coming from an amazing background, and we
28 days later, and the Olympics. Those two things are the same. You know.
That's what got him the job. But just incredible amount of talent, and we did lots of, for architecture-wise, we did lots of Corbusier, and so structurally for me that was fascinating. Lots of detail of that. It's quite a sci-fi film, so it didn't feel like it needed to be fully entrenched in 70s stuff. So it had quite a spacey, advanced. You know, it was kind of more like an 80s film, really, in that sense. A lot of the design felt quite sort of ultra modern, but in 1975.
It's a bit of a weird movie, isn't it? Because it's a book that's written, a futuristic book written in the past. So it's a period piece that's also a sci-fi film. So it's totally confused like that. Yeah.
Also, in terms of the tone and atmosphere, the performances are very interesting because you've got a load of people who are doing insane things, but at the same time maintaining this kind of facade of still being normal. And in terms of the actors, you had got a fantastic cast in the film. What were the kind of notes that you gave to them in terms of that performance, or was it all just coming from the book?
Yeah, I mean, Tom Hiddleston had done a lot of research and read a lot of the Ballard stuff, and he'd actually gone to an autopsy and seen someone have their face stripped off. And they asked...
He didn't need to.
He asked me if I wanted... The pathologist was on set when we were doing the scene to make sure it was all right, and he went to me, I'll be doing an autopsy next week if you want to come down. Well, you know what? I'm all right. I'll leave that. Maybe one day when I've got a spare half an hour. But so Tom was completely immersed in it, and the whole atmosphere on set was. I mean, again, my direction style is quite minimal. It's more just nudging and it's not telling, and it's more like creating atmosphere. And trying to just keep everyone. And part of how Laurie and I work together is like fast, so they've got no time to think and they're always kind of going forward. So it's more like creating an atmosphere on set that builds and builds, and they feel like it's more like a kind of trying to make it like a performance piece where they feel like it's happening around them, so they plug into it more easily. And then I watch the performances, and then I occasionally have to be nudged to remind me that I'm, not just watching something and it's actually happening in front of me. I'm going, it's like a really brilliant TV show I'm watching. And then it's just, and for me it's just monitoring performances slightly up and down and just keep, if it goes too far one way or the other. But it's not, there's not a lot of talking.
Laurie, I think again, this is a kind of bigger scale, but how do you go about the sort of CG stuff and that special effects stuff in this to try and create the existence of this tower block which doesn't exist, in this landscape which doesn't exist, with a kind of garden on top of a tower block that doesn't exist? Is it a lot of work and planning to kind of stitch all that together?
Yes.
Thanks.
It wasn't. I mean, the garden was a practical location, and the sense of it. So there's the shot where you can see off of it. That's actually, it's just a very simple straight line, but and then that paint was put over it to give that impression, and we put the smoke funnels on top, and there was actually, the garden was surrounded by trees. Obviously they can't be trees because they'd have to be 40-storey high trees, so those had to be painted out, but that's relatively simple because it was straight lines, so you just put sky into that. So there was, obviously that was all planned, but that was. But in terms of
that shot was bust on the day.
But we didn't. There wasn't the falling man was some green screen and and some high speed stuff, and then we did
the hardest challenge for us was the balcony stuff.
Yeah.
Like how do you do what is
wind
it?
actually?
Yeah. And what is it? What do you see out the window? And I thought you just stick up a bit of sky, it'd be all right, And then I stayed in the rotunda in Birmingham, and it's a similar height to the building in the high rise, with a bit shorter. And I looked out the window, and there's a weird thing that any window you look out of in the tower block, you can see the horizon is in the middle of the window. Whatever you do, unless you're in a plane, you have to be very high up before it goes away. And I was wondering why in all our tests it would look so weird, with just the sky. So, and then there was like backwards and forwards of whether we should use green screen throughout the windows, and it caused all kinds of expensive nonsense. So we ended up doing something very simple, which was like painting, just painting on the background. That's the end of that story. It's a bit dull, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I love seeing Action Comic that was in one of the shots, which people don't know was the notorious 1970s kind of...
Scotland banned, didn't it?
Yeah, which was a precursor of 2000 AD, which got banned for its violent content because it had loads of stories of people getting killed horrendously. So that gave me a little kind of frisson of nostalgia, and I just wondered, Do you think there's something very British about the story? Do you think it's kind of universal? Because it seems, you know, that there is something intrinsically British about the way that the people are, this kind of idea of, you know, to the point where somebody says, oh, you can't kill him, he owes me a game of squash, which seems like a very kind of quintessentially kind of British line to come out with.
Yeah, I think to a degree. I mean, it obviously playing to the home crowd in Britain. There's a lot of references in it that we share. And then it's an age thing as well, you know. I mean, I was attracted to it because of being born in the 70s as well. I was too attracted to the material, so kind of, you know, a lot of that is little jokes about that period, and it's my chance to have a go at that generation that ended up with all my parents, you know. So that's part of what that is. But I think there's a universal thing that works for. In the rest of the world as well, to a degree, because it's the kind of the idea of the struggle between the rich and the poor, and the separation between that, and I think work that plays in other places. But obviously, there's a lot of stuff that's the design, you know, the joy in the design. You know, is something that won't necessarily translate, but it doesn't matter. You know, most movies don't even have that stuff in the background, so it's fine. But you know, that's just between you and I, you know, that bit.
And the film also closes with this Margaret Thatcher quote, which I wasn't expecting, and anybody of a certain age, it gives you a certain time frisson just hearing those strident tones kind of coming out of the screen. And at the time the book was written, Thatcher was about becoming leader of the Conservative Party, which is the beginning of that journey that led to the 80s and Thatcherism, and now we're in another period where we have Conservative government, the kind of neo-Thatcherite kind of government. I wonder at what point did that come into it, that Thatcher quote, and was it this desire to explicitly link that time with this time?
Yeah, that was something, that was in Amy's script, obviously, and that was, I remember reading that for the first time and getting to the end and going, fuck, that's great. You know, because for me that's like the end of the thing, or something like that. You know, it's like, it's what's going to happen next, oh, something really shit is going to happen. And also a slight reaction against Iron Lady, which I saw, which was like some incredible, extreme science fiction for a period I actually lived through, and I didn't recognise a single note of it. You know? Not to denigrate other filmmakers, but there you go. So, yeah, and I think, and it's also part of an idea that's like that. I feel like that we're in a perpetual kind of 70s and 80s. You know, it's like it's a period of economic collapse and worry about the ecology. In the 70s they were worried about like an ice age, which seems ridiculous now, but then in 20 years' time when everyone's going, well, why are they worried about the fucking ozone going? That was bollocks as well. So it just goes up and down, and then terrorism was obviously massively in the news in the 70s, and it's just, you know, everything is totally different and everything's exactly the same, you know, so it's like the politics might be different for the terrorists, but the overall effect is the same, which is small amounts of people worrying large amounts of people, you know. So yes, you've got the 70s and then you've got the 80s, which is like, you know, people being, arrogant and doing loads of coke and thinking everything's brilliant, and all those problems in the 70s have gone away and it's going to be great again, and then it just goes back to the 70s again. So yeah, it's up and down, which I think is, you know, unfortunately we're in another version of the 70s with shitter trousers and bad music, you know. But it's better than being in a 30s, 40s cycle. So I guess we've got that.
On that note.